My family smiles in every photo online, but behind closed doors they've been hiding something from me for years. When I uncovered the truth, it felt like I'd lost them forever. The text message came in while I was still trying to steady my breath from another rejection email. We changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. My mom. Cold. Final. Not a single shred of hesitation in her words. I just stared at my phone, my heart pounding so hard it drowned out the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. My vision blurred as tears burned my eyes. I typed back with shaking fingers, whispering under my breath, "Wow. Bold move. Real brave." They thought they had won. That locking me out was the ultimate punishment. But they had no idea what was coming next. Because just 2 days later, their lawyer sent me an email with the subject line, "We need to talk. Call immediately." That was the first crack in their perfect little fortress. But let me take you back to where it all began, because none of this happened overnight. My name is Mackenzie Wilson. I'm 28 years old, and this is the story of how my life completely collapsed, only to be pieced back together by a twist I never saw coming. On the outside, my childhood looked like something out of a catalog. Oakwood Heights, just outside Boston. Picture-perfect lawns, neighbors who waved every morning, and our 2-story colonial with its crisp white fence. It looked safe, beautiful, even enviable. Inside, though, it felt like a boot camp. My mom, Patricia, ran the house like a drill sergeant with a clipboard. Every hour of my childhood was scheduled. Monday was piano, Tuesday was swim practice, Wednesday was tutoring. I barely had time to breathe, let alone choose what I loved. And my dad, Robert, he was the enforcer. He'd sit at the kitchen table, report card in hand, red pen ready. One sigh, one shake of his head, and my stomach would drop. "Mackenzie," he'd say, pushing a test back toward me with a circle around AB+. "Excellence isn't optional in this family." My little brother Trevor? He thrived in it. Born to play their game. He followed every rule, checked every box. National Honor Society, debate team captain, straight into my dad's alma mater. He was the golden boy, the one they bragged about at dinner parties. And then there was me. The kid who couldn't stop asking questions. Why do I need calculus if I want to be a writer? I'd argue, sitting at the kitchen counter, pencil tapping against my notebook. Because Wilson children don't waste their lives, my mom would snap back. Doctors. Lawyers. That's who we raise. Not starving artists. By high school, the house was a battlefield. I signed up for journalism. They enrolled me in pre-med camps. I chased internships. They shoved hospital volunteer hours down my throat. Every decision turned into a tug-of-war, and nobody was willing to let go. When college application season rolled around, I pulled off the biggest secret of my life. While pretending to follow their medical plan, I applied to business schools. When my acceptance letter from Northeastern's business program landed, with a partial scholarship, I slid it across the dinner table like it was a poker hand. "I'm going into business," I told them. "Not medicine." The silence stretched so long I thought time had stopped. Finally, my dad's voice cut through. "Then you'll do it without our support." And they meant it. While Trevor's tuition was fully paid, I worked 3 jobs, bookstore in the morning, waitressing at night, retail on weekends. I lived on ramen, powered by caffeine and stubbornness. But I did it. I became independent. At a cost. That rift between me and my parents? It turned into a canyon that never closed. After graduation, I landed a marketing job at a tech startup. It wasn't glamorous, and the salary barely covered my bills, but it was mine. I built a life, small but steady. I only saw my parents on holidays, where conversations stayed stiff and brittle. Then the pandemic hit? Our company folded almost overnight. Downsizing, layoffs, the works. I held on as long as I could, but within months, my savings were gone. I swallowed every ounce of pride I had left and made the call I swore I'd never make. 6 months, maximum, I told them. Just until I get back on my feet. They reluctantly cleared out Trevor's old room. And suddenly, at 28, I was back under their roof. From the start, it felt like I'd stepped back in time. Curfews. Chore charts. Mandatory family dinners where my mom would oh so casually mention, "Medical school is still an option, you know." Every rejection email in my inbox became a weapon for them to throw. Marketing? In this economy, my dad would sneer. You could be halfway through residency by now. I tried to contribute, pitching in what little I could from freelance gigs, but it was never enough for them. Every interview I landed for jobs they deemed beneath a Wilson was met with a look. That look. Disappointment mixed with disdain. The breaking point came after I poured everything into an interview for a digital marketing agency. 5 rounds, endless prep, sleepless nights. I came in second. I got the rejection while sitting at their kitchen table. My mom didn't even blink. "Maybe this is a sign," she said, sipping her tea. "Your grandmother would be so disappointed to see you struggling like this." That was it. The line I couldn't forgive. "Don't you dare," I snapped. "Don't you dare use grandma like that." Because grandma, her mother, had been my one true ally. She'd slipped me checks in secret, whispered encouragement when nobody else would. She told me to chase my passion. She believed in me when nobody else did. The fight that followed was nuclear. Words like failure and ungrateful were hurled like knives. I screamed that they never loved me for who I was. They shouted back that I was entitled, delusional. I grabbed my bag, slammed the door, and fled to my best friend Allison's apartment, shaking with rage and heartbreak. The next morning, I had an interview across town. Not a dream job, but something. A chance. Hope. I even texted my mom, "I'll be back tonight. We'll talk then." But when I pulled into the driveway that evening, key in hand, the door didn't budge. And that's when I saw the message that would change everything. We changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. And yet, just 2 days later, I'd find myself staring at an email from their lawyer. One line burned into my memory: we need to talk. Call immediately. What could possibly have gone so wrong, so fast, that even their lawyer had to get involved? The interview had actually gone better than I dared hope. It wasn't flashy, content marketing manager at a steady, small company, but steady mattered more than sparkle right then. As I walked back to my car, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, a little flicker of hope. Maybe this was the handhold I needed to climb out of that hole. Maybe this was the ticket back to paying my own rent, to quiet dinners that didn't come with a lecture, to not having my life graded like an assignment. I practiced the words in my head on the drive home. Let's start fresh, I rehearsed, over and over, like a charm. I'm grateful for you letting me stay, and I've got a good feeling about tonight. It sounded reasonable in my head. It sounded like a bridge. I pulled into the driveway a little after 4:30. The yard was as familiar as the lines on my own palm, hedges trimmed the way Mom liked, the garden gnome standing guard beside the path, the flag by the porch doing that slow, lazy wave in the autumn wind. For a second everything looked ordinary, exactly as it had that morning. Normal. Safe. Maybe too normal. Then my key wouldn't turn. At first I blamed the lock. Old houses have moods, I told myself. Maybe the metal was stiff from the cold. So I pushed the key in, gave it a firm twist. Nothing. I tried again, harder. The key slid but would not rotate. A little jolt of irritation, fine, stuck, then the logic flipped to a different kind of cold when I knocked and called, Mom? Dad? The lock's jammed. No answer. I circled to the kitchen door, our everyday door, and the same thing. Key in, key stuck. Back door, same. With each failed turn I felt something inside me draining out, like the air leaving a balloon. My stomach tightened into a knot the way it used to when Dad scanned my report card looking for anything less than perfection. I fumbled for my phone and called Mom. Straight to voicemail. Dad, voicemail. Trevor, finally. Hey Mac, what's up? He asked. Something's wrong, I said. I can't get into the house. They're not answering. There was a pause that sounded too long over the line. Check your texts, Trevor said finally. I peeled my thumb across the screen. There it was, a new message from Mom, timestamped while I'd been on the phone. We changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. After last night, we decided it's time for you to figure out your life on your own. Your things will be boxed and available for pickup Saturday between 2 to 5 while we're out. Arrange to have everything removed by 5 p.m. My throat went dry. The words didn't look like a typo. They were deliberate. Clean. Final. I typed back something I didn't recognize as mine, sharp, performative. Wow. Bold move. Real brave. The laugh in the text was armor, behind it I was hollowed out. I felt ridiculous and furious and small, all at once. Trevor sounded off-kilter on the phone. They called me after, he admitted. They told me what they'd done. They sounded really upset about last night. His voice tried to cushion it, to make it seem like a family spat that would blow over. Just give them time, Mac. Time. As if time could magically reinsert my laptop, my sketchbooks, my passport back into my life. As if time could make 18 years of memories and 6 months of rent vanish. I climbed into my car and sat there for a long beat, hands tight on the steering wheel, feeling ridiculous for being stunned. Of course they were petty, of course they could get cruel. But actually seeing the house, knowing everything I owned was behind that glass, was a different kind of punch. I could see, through the kitchen window, Mom moving with calm, measured steps. She didn't glance up. She knew I was outside. They both knew. I called Allison, my lifeline the night before. Ally, I said, and the sound of my own voice surprised me with how small it was. Can I crash on your couch? My parents changed the locks. Oh my God, she said. Yes. Now. I'll grab blankets. Her outrage felt like a life raft. Do you want me to come get you? No, I said, because pride still whispers in the strangest moments. I can drive. I promise I'll be there in 20. As I started the engine, Mrs. Henderson from next door shuffled up to my window. She'd lived beside us as long as I could remember, always knitted sweaters, always bringing over 2 sweet jam. Her face had that worried, maternal crease. Everything all right, dear? She asked. My cheeks burned. No, I admitted, which felt like more honesty than I'd allowed myself in months. They locked me out. Oh, sweetheart, she said, and her hand touched the glass where my fingers rested, a neighborly benediction. You have somewhere to go? Allison's, I said. The word, for now, flashed in my mind like a neon sign. Drive safe, she said, and then, if I see them carrying boxes out, I'll signal you. Her kindness was small and enormous all at once. I mouthed a thank you and then watched my childhood recede in the rearview mirror. The streetlights caught on the flag as if nothing had happened at all. Allison's couch at midnight is where I finally let myself fall apart. The house felt cavernous with absence, images of family dinners blinked through my head like a bad slideshow, candles, Mom's laugh, Trevor's perfect posture. I scrolled through photos until my thumbs cramped. Snapchat filters and graduation caps and something I'd thought was secure, belonging. Betrayal wasn't a single stab. It was a slow, cold seep, the realization that the people who promised to protect you had decided you were disposable the moment you stopped checking the boxes they'd drawn up for you. They had weaponized their expectations and then, when I didn't comply, they chose to erase me from the place I'd called home. Somewhere between 3 and 4 in the morning I stopped scrolling. Sleep came in ragged bursts. I kept thinking about how many little things were inside that house: my portfolio that had taken years to build, my passport, my escape plan if I needed one, my grandmother's letters tucked into an old shoebox. All of it out of reach, scheduled for the Saturday they picked to be out. As the sun rose, I forced myself to breathe and consider anything resembling a plan. Call a lawyer? No, too expensive and dramatic, and Trevor was already telling me to keep my head down. File for something? Where do you even start when your parents, your legal guardians for so long, decide to flip the script? I didn't know then what I would do next. I only knew two things: I'd sleep on Allison's couch for now, and I would not let that laugh-sent text be the last word. And I also didn't know that 2 days later, an email would hit my inbox with a subject line that made my hands shake: "We need to talk. Call immediately." When I woke up on Allison's couch, for a few seconds I was suspended in that foggy space between sleep and awareness. The softness of her throw blanket, the faint smell of her lavender candle, it almost tricked me into thinking I was safe. Then it hit. Like a freight train slamming through the morning silence. I wasn't home. I didn't have a home. The key in my bag, the one I'd clutched like proof that I still belonged somewhere, meant nothing now. The lock it once fit had been replaced. My address, my identity, had been erased overnight. Allison padded into the living room, her hair messy, slippers shuffling. "I made coffee," she said softly, holding out a steaming mug like it was medicine. "And I called in sick. Figured you could use someone in your corner today." I almost cried at that. "You didn't have to." "Of course I did," she cut me off. "So, what's the plan?" Plan. That word mocked me. My plan yesterday had been to land a job and ease the tension at home. Now, my plan was just surviving. I tried my parents' numbers again, leaving voicemails that grew shakier by the minute. "Please. Just let me in to grab my documents, my laptop. You can't legally do this. Just call me back." Nothing. By noon, I drove back to the house, desperate for any kind of face-to-face. Both cars were gone. Right, Wednesday. Mom's weekly church lunch. Dad's golf day. Mrs. Henderson waved me over from her garden, her hands still muddy from planting bulbs. "They left about an hour ago," she whispered. Then she pressed a sealed envelope into my hand. "Your father said to give you this." My stomach dropped. Inside, a typed letter. Cold, detached, printed like a notice taped to a stranger's door. "Any attempt to enter the premises will be considered trespassing. Your belongings will be available for collection on Saturday between 2 and 5 p.m. We expect them fully removed by that time." No signature. No warmth. Just a statement of exile. I looked up, my voice cracking. "That's my home too. How can they just?" Mrs. Henderson shook her head, her eyes kind but heavy. "I've known your parents for 25 years. I never liked how they treated you. And your grandmother, Eleanor, oh, she'd be heartbroken to see this." The name was like a knife twisting in my chest. Grandma, my one safe harbor, the only person who ever told me I was enough. She'd been gone 3 years, and suddenly the absence of her voice felt unbearable. "Thank you," I whispered. "For not pretending this is okay. I'll keep an eye on the house," she promised. "If I see anything, I'll let you know. And Mackenzie, this isn't your fault. Remember that." The rest of the day blurred into a mess of survival tasks. Sitting in a coffee shop with free Wi-Fi, clicking through job listings with shaking fingers. Scheduling a DMV appointment to replace my license. Calling my bank, and being hit with another gut punch. "Your parents removed you from the account yesterday afternoon," the rep explained gently. "Since you were listed as a secondary, they had the authority." Gone. Just like that. The last $847 I had. My lifeline. It wasn't enough for them to change the locks. They were severing every rope I had left, leaving me with nothing but air beneath me. That night, as I scrolled through social media, Trevor's post popped up like salt in an open wound. Smiling family photo. My parents, Trevor, and a bubbling pan of lasagna, Mom's specialty. The caption: "Nothing like Mom's cooking. Blessed family time." I hurled my phone across Allison's couch. "They're acting like nothing happened," I spat, pacing the room. "Like they didn't just throw me onto the street." Allison picked up my phone carefully. "Trevor's always played along. You know that. He could at least acknowledge it was wrong." "Family loyalty's complicated," she said, her voice careful. "Speaking of which, you can stay here through the weekend. But remember, Ethan's moving in Monday." Her words were gentle, but I felt the walls closing in. 3 days. That's all I had. 3 days before even Allison's couch disappeared. That night, sleep came in jagged pieces. My dreams were grotesque funhouse versions of my fears, me standing naked at job interviews, running down endless hallways of locked doors, my parents watching, laughing, dangling keys I could never reach. I woke drenched in sweat, my skull pounding with a tension headache. "You look awful," Allison said quietly over breakfast. "You need to talk to someone." "A therapist?" I asked bitterly. "With what money?" "No. A lawyer. What they did has to be illegal." The idea flickered across my mind. But lawyers cost money I didn't have, and the thought of dragging my parents to court? It felt like walking off a cliff. "Let me just get my things on Saturday," I muttered. "See if they've cooled off." But I knew. This wasn't heat of the moment anger. This was years of conditional love reaching its final form, total control through abandonment. That afternoon, I bought a prepaid phone card with the last of my cash, terrified my phone bill wouldn't clear without access to my account. I sat hunched over a job application for a barista gig, anything to stop the free fall, when my email pinged. Sender: Sanders and Wilson Law Firm. Subject: urgent regarding Wilson family property and assets. My chest seized. Property and assets? What did that even mean? Were they suing me? Disowning me in some official capacity? My hand shook as I clicked the message open. And that was the moment, the exact second, my entire understanding of my family, and the last 28 years of my life, flipped upside down. The email began like something out of a legal drama, formal, cold, almost unreal. Dear Miss Wilson, I am contacting you regarding urgent matters pertaining to the Eleanor Wilson Trust, for which our firm serves as legal executive. Recent events have necessitated our immediate intervention. I blinked at the screen, my pulse hammering. Eleanor Wilson. My grandmother. It has come to our attention that your current residential status has been compromised, which constitutes a direct violation of the terms established in your grandmother's trust. We request an immediate consultation to discuss your legal options. Legal options? A trust? What did my living situation have to do with my grandmother's estate? The message ended with contact information for a senior partner, Jonathan Peters, and a stark confidentiality warning in bold italics. I read it once. Twice. 3 times. My hand shook as I pressed the number. Sanders and Wilson, how may I direct your call? A polished receptionist's voice greeted me. This is Mackenzie Wilson. I received an email from Jonathan Peters about my grandmother's trust. One moment, please, Miss Wilson. After a brief hold underscored by generic classical music, a steady male voice came through. Miss Wilson. Jonathan Peters. Thank you for returning my message so quickly. Mr. Peters, what is this about? My grandmother's trust? I didn't even know she had one. That's precisely why we need to speak. There are confidentiality matters I can't disclose over the phone. Could you come into the office tomorrow morning at 10? Yes, absolutely. I scribbled down the address, my heart racing. Excellent. And Miss Wilson, please bring any documentation you have about your recent living situation, especially concerning your departure from the family residence. I hung up and just sat there, staring at nothing. My grandmother had planned something? Protected something? For me? Eleanor Wilson had always been the rebel in our family. She built her own business from scratch, traveled the world, married late, never once let anyone tell her what a woman should do. She and my mother clashed constantly. Mom wanted control, Grandma valued freedom. I could still hear her voice. Some people need to control others to feel secure. Real strength is letting people find their own way, while standing ready to catch them if they fall. When she passed 3 years ago, the funeral was brief, sterile, exactly how my mother preferred. I'd been too lost in grief to question why Grandma's estate seemed to pass directly to my parents without fuss. I remembered her meaningful looks when they discussed her assets, the times she pulled me aside to whisper encouragement. Her final words to me still rang clear. One day, Mackenzie, you'll understand just how much I believe in you. Promise me you'll never let them crush your spirit. Back then, I thought it was just grandmotherly love. Now, maybe it was something more. I barely slept that night. My brain spun through every possibility, from a small savings bond to some secret fortune. What if she'd left me something substantial? What if she'd seen this coming? The next morning, I arrived downtown 15 minutes early, acutely aware of my wrinkled clothes, the bags under my eyes. The lobby of Sanders and Wilson gleamed with marble floors and glass walls that reflected my nerves right back at me. Miss Wilson, the receptionist greeted with a practiced smile. Mr. Peters is expecting you. 15th floor, suite 1520. The elevator ride felt endless. By the time I stepped into their sleek reception area, my palms were damp. Before I could even sit, a tall, silver-haired man in a tailored suit appeared. Miss Wilson. Jonathan Peters. Please, come in. His office overlooked the city skyline. It was impressive, but not ostentatious, walls lined with leather-bound books, the air faintly smelling of polished wood and coffee. He gestured toward a chair. Thank you for coming so quickly. I understand things have been difficult. That's an understatement, I muttered, then caught myself. Sorry. It's just been a lot. He gave me a reassuring nod and opened a thick folder. Miss Wilson, were you aware your grandmother established a conditional family trust before her passing? My breath hitched. No. I knew she had assets, but my parents handled everything. That's the issue. Your grandmother placed the Wilson family home into this trust, along with significant financial assets. My pulse kicked up. What kind of conditions? The house was to remain a family residence, with guaranteed access for all direct Wilson heirs, including you. Your parents were named trustees, but their right to occupy the property depended on your continued access. By locking you out, they violated those terms. I gripped the arm of the chair. Wait, you're saying the house isn't theirs? It's my grandmother's trust property? Correct, Peter said firmly. The Eleanor Wilson Trust owns it. Your parents receive a monthly stipend to maintain it, but only under the condition that you always have a right to live there if you choose. My throat closed. And when they changed the locks, they triggered a violation, he confirmed. The trust has monitoring provisions. When your access credentials failed on 3 separate doors within a short period, we were notified automatically. Automatically? I whispered. Your grandmother anticipated family conflict. She built safeguards to protect you. Tears blurred my vision. My grandmother hadn't just told me she believed in me, she had acted on it. She had looked into the future and created a shield against the very rejection I was now enduring. For the first time since my parents slammed that door shut, I felt something flicker deep in my chest. Not just grief. Not just fear. Hope. And maybe, just maybe, justice. Jonathan's voice was calm, but each word landed like a thunderclap. There's more, he said, sliding a fresh stack of papers across the desk. The trust includes substantial educational funds designated for you. According to our records, you've never accessed them, despite completing your degree. Did you ever apply for these through your parents? I felt my throat tighten. No. I worked multiple jobs to pay for school. They told me flat out they wouldn't support a business degree. His expression hardened. That's extremely concerning. As trustees, your parents were legally obligated to disclose those funds to you. Their failure to do so raises the possibility of financial misconduct. We'll need to investigate further. The office blurred around me. The walls, the bookshelves, the skyline beyond the glass, all swimming in and out of focus. My parents hadn't just locked me out of a house that wasn't theirs to control. They might have deliberately hidden money that was meant to help me build a future. What happens now? My voice was small, almost a whisper. You have options, Jonathan said, his tone shifting into something more deliberate, more official. As a beneficiary, you can invoke immediate enforcement of the trust terms. That would compel your parents to restore your access to the home within 24 hours, or face severe consequences. Those include suspension of their monthly stipend and possible removal as trustees altogether. I blinked at him, stunned. You mean? I could actually force them to let me back in, or even take the house away from them? Yes, he confirmed simply. Alternatively, if you prefer a less confrontational route, we could negotiate a settlement. That might involve securing independent housing for you, funded by the trust, while your parents remain in the family home under revised conditions. For the first time in my life, the balance of power had tilted. I'd grown up under their thumb, constantly reminded of their control, financially, emotionally, practically. And yet, here I was, holding leverage I never imagined possible. I need time, I breathed. Time to process. Of course. He handed me a slim black USB drive. These are digital copies of the trust documents. Review them carefully. You have 3 days to decide how you want to proceed. As I stood to leave, one question gnawed at me. Mr. Peters, how did you know the locks had been changed? The trust triggered an alert, yes, but how did you know the details? A faint smile tugged at his lips. Your grandmother was meticulous. She asked us to set up additional monitoring through a trusted local contact who would notify us of suspicious activity. And then it clicked. Mrs. Henderson. My grandmother's oldest friend. Always hovering nearby. Always watching. Always protecting. I left the office clutching that USB like it was a lifeline. The city outside was a blur of noise and movement, but inside me something steady had shifted. My grandmother had seen this coming. She'd built a shield I never knew existed. And for the first time since the night the locks changed, I felt something other than fear. I felt hope. Back at Allison's, I plugged the drive into my phone adapter, the screen lighting up with document after document. The legal jargon was dense, but the heart of it was unmistakable. My grandmother had engineered an escape hatch for me, a carefully woven safety net designed to withstand my parents' control. The family home, the white colonial where I'd grown up, had been purchased by her decades ago. She'd allowed my parents to live there rent-free, but ownership had never passed to them. Upon her death, the property went into trust with strict conditions. They could stay. They would even receive monthly stipends for upkeep and taxes. But only if they guaranteed me unconditional access whenever I needed it. The moment they shut me out, they triggered consequences. First a warning. Then suspension of their stipend after 7 days. If they failed to comply for 30 days, they risked removal as trustees and could lose the right to live there altogether. They risked everything, I whispered into the quiet of Allison's apartment. Just to punish me. But that wasn't the only revelation. The trust outlined a sizable education fund, money meant for me during college, funds that could still be tapped for graduate studies or professional training. And according to the records, my parents had been reminded of it quarterly. They'd known. They'd known all along, and they'd watched me grind myself into the ground with 3 jobs and student loans while that money sat untouched. And then I found it, the file that broke me wide open. A scanned letter, written in my grandmother's looping script, dated just 2 months before her death. My dearest Mackenzie, if you are reading this, then circumstances have unfolded as I feared. I have done everything in my power to buffer the controlling tendencies I've seen in your parents, but I worried that without me, they might go too far. This trust is my way of protecting you, even after I'm gone. You have always had the courage to follow your own path, even when it cost you. That independence is not defiance, it is strength. The funds and provisions here are not about money, but freedom. Freedom to live on your terms, without being coerced or cornered. Use these resources without guilt. They were meant for you. And never forget, you are loved, exactly as you are. I am prouder of you than words could ever express. All my love, Grandma Eleanor. I read it once. Twice. A third time, the words dissolving through tears I couldn't stop. She had known. She had planned for this moment. She had loved me enough to build a wall between me and the storm, even from the grave. For the first time in years, I felt her presence again. Not just in memory, but in action, in protection. And I knew, my parents hadn't just underestimated me. They had underestimated her. The next morning, I walked back into Jonathan Peters' office with the USB drive still in my bag and a storm in my chest. I sat across from him, the city skyline gleaming behind his desk. I went through the documents, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. I understand more now, but the education fund? If my parents have been using it. Jonathan's expression darkened as he slid a new report toward me. We've already begun a preliminary audit. What we found is troubling. Over the past 3 years, there have been regular withdrawals from that fund. And yet, you weren't enrolled in any education programs. The words punched the air out of me. They've been taking it? Money that was supposed to be mine? Is that even legal? As trustees, Jonathan explained, his voice even but edged with steel, they had access. But access is not the same as permission. The fund was created exclusively for your educational benefit. Using it otherwise is a serious breach of fiduciary duty. The betrayal stung like acid. All those nights in college when I'd worked double shifts, when I cried over loans and lived on ramen, and the money had been sitting there, siphoned away. Jonathan continued, property records also show your parents recently completed major renovations to the family home, new kitchen, upgraded master bath, full backyard landscaping, totaling around $87,000. I remembered. My mother showing off her gleaming new cabinets, my father bragging about the water feature in his custom-designed patio. They had smiled, called it the result of years of careful saving. They used my education money to build their dream house, I said flatly, my hands curling into fists. That appears to be the case, Jonathan replied. We'll need a forensic accounting to confirm the full scope. My chest felt tight, but I forced the words out. So what are my options now? Jonathan leaned forward, his hands clasped. You have 3 possible paths. First, we can move immediately for full enforcement of the trust, restore your rights, remove your parents as trustees, recover misappropriated funds. It's the most aggressive option. Second, we pursue negotiation, a settlement where your rights are restored and stricter oversight is imposed, but without stripping your parents entirely. Third, family mediation with legal representation, attempting to salvage some relationship while still protecting you. I let out a bitter laugh. After what I've just learned, why would I choose anything other than the first option? Because, Jonathan said carefully, family litigation can be brutal. Even when you're right, the emotional cost can hollow you out. I've seen it too many times. I would be remiss not to tell you that. I swallowed, my rage warring with the ache of loss. What would you recommend? Start with a formal notice, he advised. It asserts your rights, lays out the violations, and puts them on the defensive. Often, just proving the power dynamic has shifted is enough to bring the other side to the table. It made sense. I nodded. Do it. Send the notice. Consider it done. You'll have copies by tomorrow. As I stood, one last question burned. Mr. Peters, why did my grandmother go to such lengths? Did she know, really know, my parents would do something like this? Jonathan's expression softened. Your grandmother was perceptive. She spoke often of what she called conditional love. She worried your parents would withdraw support whenever you stepped outside their plans. She feared it would escalate once she was gone. Her goal was to give you freedom, real freedom, to build your life without being cornered by their approval or money. I left the office with my chest heavy but my spine straighter. Grief, yes. Rage, absolutely. But under it all, determination. My grandmother had left me more than a trust. She'd left me the ability to finally stand up to them. The legal letter went out the next day by courier. Jonathan called me an hour later. They've received it. Brace yourself. The storm hit within minutes. My phone buzzed with calls, voicemails, texts. My father's voice was sharp with fury in the first voicemail. What is the meaning of this? Some lawyer accusing us of violations? Absurd. Outrageous. Call me back immediately. My mother's tone was dripping with guilt in her message. Mackenzie, how could you do this to us, to your own family? After everything we've done for you? Please, call us, let's sort this out. By evening, their words had shifted to something almost sugary. Honey, there's been a misunderstanding, Mom texted. We never meant for you to leave permanently. Let's talk this out as a family. I didn't respond. I forwarded everything to Jonathan, who told me the same thing every time, don't engage. Let the process work. This is their manipulation, don't fall for it. That night, Trevor's name lit up my screen. Mac, he said, his voice edged with panic. What the hell is going on? Mom and Dad are losing their minds about some trust and lawyers. I took a breath. Did they tell you what they did? That they locked me out of the house? That they used my education fund for their kitchen remodel? There was a pause. They said you're twisting things. That grandma's trust was meant for the whole family and you're trying to weaponize it. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Of course, that's their story. Ask them where they got the $87,000 for the renovations. I have the records, Trevor. They've been bleeding my inheritance dry since Grandma died. Silence stretched across the line. That can't be right, they said they saved. Then come to the meeting Jonathan's arranging, I said firmly. See the documents for yourself. Decide what's true after you look me in the eye. When I hung up, a strange calm settled over me. For once, I wasn't cornered, wasn't silenced. I had evidence. I had the law. And I had my grandmother's voice, echoing across the years, telling me not to let them crush my spirit. The stage was set. Whether it ended in reconciliation or complete destruction, one thing was certain, this time, I wasn't backing down. The Tuesday morning air was sharp and cool, but I felt sweat gathering at the back of my neck as I walked into Sanders and Wilson. My heart thudded with every step, but my stride was steady. This was it, the confrontation I'd been preparing for my entire life, though I never imagined it would look like this. Jonathan was waiting in the lobby, crisp in his suit, calm as ever. Remember, he said as we rode the elevator, this isn't about punishment. It's about boundaries, and honoring your grandmother's intentions. The conference room looked like it belonged in a movie, heavy mahogany table, polished leather chairs, pitchers of water catching the light. An associate set up with a laptop at one end, a financial advisor flipping through binders at the other. The formality pressed down on me like a weight, but Allison's borrowed blazer felt like armor. At precisely 10 a.m., the doors opened. My parents swept in with Gregory Walsh, Dad's golf buddy turned legal counsel, on their heels. Trevor trailed behind them, shoulders hunched, looking more like a teenager dragged to detention than a 24-year-old lawyer in training. Mom tried to reach for me with open arms, her face soft, rehearsed. I stepped back. No contact. Her expression crumpled, but I didn't let it touch me. I couldn't. Not today. We all sat. Jonathan began without ceremony. We are here to address serious concerns regarding the Eleanor Wilson Trust, specifically violations of the residence provision and potential misappropriation of designated funds. My father scoffed, his voice sharp. Ridiculous. Eleanor was my mother-in-law. We discussed her wishes countless times. She wanted the home for family, our family. Jonathan's gaze didn't waver. With respect, Mr. Wilson, the documents are unambiguous. The trust guarantees Miss Mackenzie Wilson access to the property. Changing the locks was a direct violation. He slid printed copies of the provisions across the table. And further, Jonathan added, his voice cool but edged, financial audits show over $120,000 withdrawn from the education fund in the past 3 years. Funds explicitly designated for Miss Wilson's academic and professional development. Instead, they were spent on renovations. Mom's face drained of color. Dad shifted in his chair, glancing at Walsh. Walsh cleared his throat. There may have been technical violations. Administrative oversights. But nothing deliberate. Jonathan's reply was swift. Locking a beneficiary out of her home is not an administrative oversight. Neither is siphoning 6 figures from an education fund into luxury home projects. Trevor's head snapped up. Wait, $120,000? Mom, Dad, you told me it was just maintenance. Trevor, Dad's warning tone sliced through the air. But the damage was done. Jonathan laid out the evidence piece by piece, financial statements, contractor invoices, even copies of the text messages that proved the lockout. Every page was another stone stacked against them. Finally, Jonathan turned to me. Miss Wilson, would you like to speak? I inhaled deeply, my palms pressed flat on the table. Then I met my parents' eyes. My whole life, I began, my voice trembling at first, then hardening, you've controlled me with money. When I chose business instead of medicine, you cut me off. You let me drown in debt and exhaustion through college while you sat on funds Grandma specifically left for me. And when I needed a place to land, when I came home at my lowest, you locked me out like I was a stranger. Mom's tears spilled over. We only wanted what was best for you, Mackenzie. We just wanted you to succeed. No, I said firmly, my voice cutting through her sob. You wanted me to succeed on your terms. That's not love. That's control. Dad slammed his palm against the table. This is how you repay us? By dragging lawyers into our family business? Your grandmother would be ashamed. Jonathan didn't flinch. On the contrary, Mrs. Wilson foresaw this exact scenario. That's why she built monitoring mechanisms into the trust. She even left a letter. He distributed copies. I watched as my parents' eyes scanned the familiar handwriting, my grandmother's final words, the ones that named their behavior for what it was, conditional love. Mom pressed a hand to her mouth, shoulders shaking. Trevor looked stricken. I didn't know. Mac, why didn't you tell me it was this bad? I softened, just slightly. Would you have believed me? You've always seen a different side of them. He dropped his gaze. Silence filled the room, heavy as stone. Then Jonathan redirected, his tone steady. We're not here to tear this family apart. We're here to realign with Eleanor Wilson's intentions. Miss Wilson has prepared a proposal. All eyes turned to me. My pulse thundered, but for the first time in years, I wasn't the powerless one. I straightened my shoulders, the navy blazer tight across my back, and prepared to speak, not as the daughter they thought they controlled, but as the woman my grandmother had believed I could be. I laid the document flat on the polished table, my hand steady despite the thundering in my chest. I'm not here to destroy you or drag this through court for years, I said, my voice clear and deliberate. What I want is independence, and acknowledgement of the damage that's been done. My proposal has 3 parts. The room went silent. My father's jaw tightened, my mother dabbed at her eyes, Trevor shifted uncomfortably. First, I continued, the trust will purchase a modest condo for me, funded by the educational provisions that were denied to me in college. That gives me stable housing while I rebuild my career. Second, you can stay in the family home, but all trust finances will be managed by an independent trustee from now on. No more self-dealing. Third, we commit to family therapy. Together. To break the pattern of control and conditional love that's poisoned our relationship for years. My father leaned forward, his usual bluster dimmed but still simmering. And if we refuse? Jonathan answered smoothly, before I had to. Then we proceed with full enforcement. That means removal as trustees, legal action to recover misappropriated funds, and a reduction of your benefits under the trust. This proposal is, frankly, generous. Mr. Walsh, their lawyer, whispered into my father's ear. Dad's jaw clenched, his nostrils flaring. Finally, Walsh spoke aloud, we'll need 48 hours to review the terms in detail. Very well, Jonathan replied. You have 48 hours. After that, we escalate. The meeting adjourned, papers gathered, chairs scraping back. As Dad stormed off to huddle with Walsh, Mom lingered, her voice low, almost fragile. Mackenzie, she whispered, I never meant. I didn't realize how it looked from your side. It wasn't an apology, not really. But it was more than I'd ever gotten before. That's why I included therapy, I said gently but firmly. We can't fix what we refuse to face. She nodded, her eyes a complicated storm of shame and sorrow. Trevor walked beside me toward the elevator. I should have noticed more, he admitted. I knew things were tense, but the money? The lockout? I didn't see it. You were the golden child, I said, not with bitterness, just truth. You never had to. I want to help fix this, he said quietly. And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. 47 hours later, Jonathan called. My parents had accepted, with only minor tweaks to the therapy clause. The condo purchase process was underway. I would have access to the family home to collect my belongings at will. It wasn't the cinematic victory I'd once fantasized about. No slamming gavels, no villains dragged away in chains. It was subtler, messier, and more real, a dismantling of patterns that had ruled my life since childhood. When I hung up the phone, I realized my grandmother had given me more than financial security. She had given me the chance to finally break free. 1 month later, I stood in the living room of my new condo, sunlight streaming through wide windows onto bare walls waiting for paint. It wasn't extravagant, just a one-bedroom in a safe, quiet neighborhood. But it was mine. Every corner, every shelf, every decision inside those walls belonged to me. The settlement rolled forward smoothly. The trust purchased the unit, and a stipend gave me breathing room while I hunted for work. My parents stayed in the old house, but an independent trustee now controlled the finances. For Dad, it was a humiliation. For me, it was justice. Retrieving my things had been tense but survivable. Trevor helped me pack boxes into his SUV, intercepting Dad's passive-aggressive remarks and Mom's teary pleas. "They'll adjust," Trevor whispered as we loaded the last box. "They're finally facing consequences. Maybe for the first time ever." The therapy sessions were harder than anything. Our first one was almost unbearable. Dad sat with arms crossed, refusing to speak, while Mom cried through the entire hour. Dr. Bennett, the therapist, had the patience of a saint. "Family patterns don't change overnight," she told us bluntly at the end. "But showing up is the first step." Shockingly, my parents did keep showing up. Dad still simmered, but in the third session, Mom said something I never thought I'd hear. "My mother was so critical," she admitted softly. "Nothing I did was ever enough. I thought I was protecting you by pushing you harder. I thought I was being a good mother." It wasn't an apology. But it was the first crack in the wall, the first hint of honesty about the cycle my grandmother had always tried to break. And as I sat there, listening, I realized something. My grandmother hadn't just left me money. She'd left me a map out of the cage my family had built. And for the first time in my life, I was following it. Meanwhile, I had started seeing Dr. Rivera, a soft-spoken therapist with kind eyes and a way of making even the heaviest truths feel manageable. She specialized in family trauma, and during our second session she looked me straight in the eye and said, "What you're experiencing is a massive shift in power dynamics. For your entire life, you've been the dependent one, the one chasing approval. Now, suddenly, you're the one holding the leverage. That's a difficult transition, for everyone." Her words cracked something open inside me. She helped me unpack the tangled knot of emotions, vindication laced with guilt, grief for the parents I wished I had, rage for the ones I did, and that fragile flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, things could change. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, Dr. Rivera reminded me often. It means releasing the expectation that the past could have been different. And then choosing, deliberately, how to move forward, with boundaries. So that's what I worked on. Boundaries. With housing secured and financial stability through the trust, I could finally breathe enough to look at the future differently. Not in panic. Not in survival mode. For the first time, I applied to the master's program in digital marketing I'd always dreamed of. And this time, the tuition came straight from the education fund my grandmother had intended for me all along. Sitting at my laptop, enrollment confirmation glowing on the screen, I swear I could feel her hand on my shoulder. Trevor and I, freed from the old dynamic of golden child versus black sheep, began building something real. Over coffee one afternoon, he confessed, "I did everything right, grades, college, career. And I don't even know if I like being an accountant. I just never questioned it." "It's never too late to start questioning," I told him. And hearing myself, I realized how much I sounded like Grandma Eleanor. The most unexpected gift came from Mrs. Henderson, the neighbor who had stood up for me during the lockout. She invited me for tea, pouring Earl Grey into delicate china cups. Then she leaned forward, eyes kind but serious. "Eleanor worried about you constantly," she said. She knew how Patricia and Robert could be. That's why she set up the trust the way she did. You were her priority." My breath caught. "You were the local contact Jonathan mentioned." She nodded. "Yes. Eleanor asked me to keep an eye on things after she was gone. When I saw them change those locks, I knew immediately what it meant." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "She was proud of you, Mackenzie. Fiercely proud. Your independence, your stubbornness, those were her favorite things about you." I left her house with tears streaking my cheeks and a heart that felt both heavy and full. 6 months after the settlement, the dust had settled into something like equilibrium. Family therapy was still rocky, Dad rarely spoke, Mom cried more than she talked, but progress existed in small, fragile steps. Mom had even started her own therapy, sometimes admitting that her own mother's constant criticism shaped the way she parented me. Dad was harder, but at least he'd stopped openly fighting the process. The trust ran exactly as it was meant to, with independent oversight ensuring no more siphoning off funds. I was in my second semester of grad school, the kind of program I'd once thought impossible. Then came the email. A marketing internship at a rising digital agency, perfectly aligned with my studies. I applied immediately and was called for an interview. The morning of the interview, I stood in front of my mirror, blazer crisp, hair smoothed, confidence shining in a way it hadn't months before. On my nightstand sat a framed photo of Grandma Eleanor, her steady eyes and knowing smile watching me. I picked it up, whispering, "You knew, didn't you? You knew I'd need protection. You gave me the tools, even after you were gone. I wish you were here to see this. To see me. It hit me then, she had given me so much more than money. She'd given me freedom. The chance to break the cycle. To build a life that was mine. As I headed out the door, her presence was with me, quiet, unwavering, proud. And now, I want to turn the question to you. Have you ever had to stand up to family pressure or expectations to follow your own path? Share your story in the comments, I'd love to hear it. If this journey resonated with you, please like and subscribe to follow along with more. Remember, the family we choose, and the boundaries we set, can be the most powerful steps toward finding who we really are. You deserve love and support without strings attached. Thank you for watching, and never forget, you are stronger than you realize.